High Dynamic Range, HDR. What is that? Let's start with an example. Just imagine you're just going to capture an image of your friend who is just standing in a shelter, and in the background you have some landscape which is lit evenly. Then when you try to expose to your subject, that is your friend, you may see that your background can be overexposed, that is, it can be just blown out, right? When you try to expose to your friend. I know that you had been in this kind of situation. To handle these situations, we have a technique in photography called as high dynamic range photography. So before going deep into that, let's see what is dynamic range. In simple terms, dynamic range is the difference between the details that your camera can capture in the brightest highlights and the darkest shadows. I hope that was clear. So that's all guys, that's dynamic range. It's the capacity of your camera. It's measured in stops. So generally high-end cameras have higher dynamic range and basic cameras have some poor dynamic range. So every camera cannot capture the details in the darkest shadows and the brightest highlights in a single image. So that's why HDR photography was into play. So let's see how to take HDR images, and also let's see when to use this HDR photography technique and when not to use it. So yes guys, if you're new to the channel, I'm Cario from India. We talk photography, filmmaking, editing and many other social media stuffs that help creators like us. So yes guys, without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Welcome back. So nowadays every one of us has a smartphone, and mostly all of the recent smartphones have the HDR option. The simple technique behind the HDR option in your smartphone camera is your smartphone camera is gonna take two images, one exposing to the brightest highlights and second exposing to the darkest shadows. So it will take two images at a time and it will just combine it together to give out the best results on HDR mode. When you just compare the image that you shot without the HDR mode on and with the HDR mode on, if you compare these two photos, you can see the amount of details that's available in the HDR image. This is because it has taken two images, one exposing to the brightest highlights and two exposing to the darkest shadows. So combining those two images, we will have better details. So now we have seen how HDR works in smartphone, right? So how the same HDR works in DSLR or mirrorless cameras. So for this, you need to follow a technique called as bracketing. So most of the basic cameras don't have this. Maybe the mid-range and the high-end cameras have option called as bracketing on your DSLR or mirrorless cameras, where you can just give the settings to just jump between 3 stop difference or 6 stop difference, how many photos you want to take. I just said like in a smartphone it takes two images and combines them both, right? In a DSLR you can just select the number of images that you want to take, maybe 5 or 7 or 9. That can be adjusted with the settings that's available on your DSLR. And also you can also select the stops, like you want a 2 stop difference, 3 stop difference, that can be selected in DSLRs. So this may vary from brand to brand, but the basic behind is same. So it's like just the camera captures multiple images and you will have all these multiple images, and in Photoshop you need to just combine all them. There is some easy technique to just combine all them. Photoshop works best in that it will automatically combine all the images and give you the HDR image. So that's how HDR images is taken in cameras, where bracketing is needed. So if a camera does not have the bracketing options, how to take the HDR images? Simple guys, just expose to the brightest highlights, take an image. Just expose to the darkest shadows, take an image. Just combine them, that's it. So here a mistake that you can probably make is you must not change the frame of the camera, right? So you just need a tripod if you are going to take high dynamic range images. So have it in mind. The next option If you are going to expose to the subject or to the background or whatever it is, don't expose with ISO or with aperture. So changing the ISO may bring some grains on one image and the second image can be without grains. So combining them would be not good, right? And similar way, if you change the aperture, one image you may have some good amount of depth and the next image you may not have the depth. So just combining them would be quite tricky. So whenever you have decided to take HDR images, make sure that you are going to adjust the exposure with the help of shutter speed, only shutter speed. So it must not affect the depth or grains in the image, and that's why we are going to adjust the exposure with shutter speed. Take two images, put in Photoshop, use the automatic merge option and you will get HDR image. So that's how you can take HDR images with smartphone, DSLRs with auto bracketing option and DSLRs without auto bracketing option. So now we are going to see when to use this HDR mode and when not to use. So first, when are we gonna need the HDR mode? When to use the HDR mode? First one, when you have extreme backlight situations or when you have low light situations. And next one, when you shoot landscapes. So when you're shooting a wide landscape, we cannot say that the entire part of the landscape is evenly lit. That's not possible, right? So some area may be more of shadow kind and some area can be a bit of highly exposed. In such situations, yes guys, go with HDR option. You're gonna get some amazing results. And one more time, when you can go for HDR is when you have extreme sunlight on your portraits. So in such situations, you can try this HDR mode to avoid blown up backgrounds or darkened faces of the subjects. So these are the 3 times that I would suggest to go with the HDR option. And when not to use the HDR option? When you have movement on your frame, when you have some people moving or vehicles moving, then don't go with HDR option because you may have that motion blur on your image. It won't work that good. Next, don't go for HDR when you're going to capture high contrast images. For example, silhouettes. When you're just trying to just capture silhouette images, don't go with HDR option because HDR is going to bring the details from your shadows. So silhouettes won't be silhouettes when you try it with HDR. So yes guys, these are some of the tips to capture high dynamic range images from your smartphone or DSLR or high-end mirrorless cameras as well. And I hope this video was helpful. If yes, do hit that like button, and if you're new to the channel, I really appreciate if you could just hit that subscribe button down below here. Yeah, here. So yes guys, that's it for this video. Just post your comment guys, let's interact in the comment section, and that's it for this video guys. We'll meet in another video. Until then, it's your Carrio signing off.